So hello and good morning everyone on this wet, very wet and rainy day. Thank you so much Gabrielle and Jean-Philippe and Engin for this opportunity to share my thoughts and my work. It's lovely to be here in this beautiful part of the world. As it happens, Lausanne is not a very new experience for me. I came here once before, just as I had been married. My husband and I backpacked across Europe and it feels like a lifetime ago. He was working in London at the time. Any guesses how many years ago this might have been? You might guess my age. Well, it was September 1990, almost exactly 33 years ago. I could spend the rest of my hour talking about, and sharing pictures about that lovely trip, but we've got so many important, serious issues to discuss. So suffice to say, very happy to be here, but let's get started. So this is going to be a bit of a juggling act. We will look briefly at K-12 AI education. We'll look at the state of AI education in K-12 currently with a couple of examples from my research. Lessons from K-12 computer science education. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's not repeat mistakes. And finally, we look at challenges, open issues, and recommendations. So there's going to be a little bit of looking back at CS education, what we've just been doing, and a little looking ahead at AI education. And we'll also be doing a little bit of zooming out into the state of the field. A lot of the talk is about that, but also zooming into a couple of specific examples. So, as recently as maybe 3 to 5 years ago, these used to be like the center of the conversation, the slides that I would talk about. It was all about CS education. It's been a passion for most of us here. There's been healthy, albeit slow progress around the world, but everybody has been moving ahead. These are headlines just from this year, actually. And then, suddenly out of nowhere, it feels like we're being overpowered by this juggernaut coming our way that some are calling the AI tsunami. And AI is literally everywhere, and especially since last December when ChatGPT came out, it's like all hell broke loose. Every single day you'll see stories that reflect this hype and crazy fast progress that AI and machine learning are making. You'll see stories that spell a lot of gloom and doom, and people are justifiably afraid or apprehensive, unsure what to make of it. And you'll see examples of just how pernicious AI can be, perpetuating the biases that exist in our society, and in ways that wasn't always so apparent in computing alone before AI. And so even as this debate is ongoing, the truth is that AI cannot be ignored. And as with anything else, I believe education is the best strategy for thriving and the best inoculation against misuse. So we want to build the next generation of learners that understand this technology. So given this reality, it makes sense to prepare our kids for a future with AI. And many, like in this group called Teach AI, it's a worldwide consortium on which I'm an advisor, we believe that doing nothing is not an option. There was a Brookings Institute report that came out recently which said that just like computers and having access to computers and the internet was the previous digital divide, people who can understand and use AI well will sort of fuel the next digital divide. So, how do we tackle both these things now? There's CS education and people are now talking about AI education, and it does feel like too much coming at us too fast. So I will begin by saying computer science education is not going anywhere. If anything, it's just as mandatory, essential, and foundational for the simple reason that there can be no AI without computing. So AI and education will always be intertwined, although learning goals and emphases will shift. They must shift. So in this presentation too, we'll sort of look at CS education and AI education in this intertwined way. So, a brief look at the state of AI education in K-12. I'm going to draw a lot from this paper that has just been accepted to the SIGSI symposium in Portland in March 2024. And it's not a meta-analysis, but rather a synthesis of what's happening. The paper reviews ongoing and early research in K-12 AI education. It synthesizes the key themes that are emerging. It identifies challenges and tensions in this next new thing, and it suggests some takeaways and guidance. So that's what I'm going to do a little bit of here. So looking at this broad group of projects that are going on in AI in K-12 research, there's various goals. They're looking at developing broad AI literacy, developing understanding of AI tools and machine learning techniques, designing ethics and fairness-focused experiences, teaching AI basics from a CS topics lens, so many different kinds of things, examining the appropriateness of diverse pedagogies for developing understanding. Because let's face it, AI is a very technical, it's a very mathematical topic. It's usually taught at the undergraduate level, and that too in the senior years, at least in the US, it's an elective usually. And so, bringing it down to the K-12 level takes some thinking. Examining pedagogies that serve a well-defined purpose, for example, broadening participation, lifting the hood on how it works, so making it less magical, which is always a goal for us in computing, integrating AI into other learning, into other subjects, and then co-designing with teachers and teacher preparation. So these are sort of, the landscape there. So out of these, there are some key themes that are emerging and some outcomes. There's a better understanding of what we should be teaching in schools about AI. There is data primacy and CT 2.0, as some people are calling, computational thinking 2.0. The importance of ethics, bias, and critical examination of AI. Pedagogies, instructional approaches, ways to integrate AI into other subjects, and finally, co-design and teacher preparation. And a plethora of free curricular resources. You cannot imagine how much has come out in the last 3 to 4 years, and it's all freely available. So I'm going to touch upon these 4 briefly, because the other 2, there is not a whole lot going on right now, but some people have been doing it. So what learners should know and be able to do. So, the good folks at AI4K12.org, and they're not the only people, a lot of people have been mulling on this, but they have attempted to articulate what it means to be teaching AI. And they came out with these 5 big ideas of AI. And these are perception, that computers perceive the world using sensors, representation and reasoning, that representation is one of the fundamental problems of intelligence, both natural and artificial, and agents maintain these representations and use them for reasoning. Learning, computers can learn from data, and boy can they learn, we found out. Natural interaction, agents can use many kinds of knowledge to interact naturally, and now we can see they can have very natural conversations almost with humans. And societal impact, which is, both positive and negative, and that rightly is at the center of everything. This poster, by the way, has been translated into several languages if you go to that website, and this is the one in French. So the other thing is primacy of data, centrality of data and data science. So data science has been gaining increasing prominence in both mathematics, Machik and I were just talking about it, in both mathematics and CS since even before the AI boom, because of its connection with computation and analytics and its significance in STEM and computing integration. And that relevance has grown with the growth of AI. But some researchers like Matti Tedre and his group in Finland, University of Eastern Finland, say that data literacy is not enough. We have to give data agency. So it extends the concept of data literacy by emphasizing people's ability not only to understand, but actively control and manipulate information flows so that you can use them wisely and ethically. So whereas data literacy involved understanding of what data should be collected, what happens, how you clean it, etc., what consequences, data agency refers to people's volition, skills, attitudes, and capacity for informed actions that make a difference in the digital world. So it's a much more active concept, like computational action versus computational thinking, if you remember. It was a way of framing it. The other thing is computational thinking survives. Even today, people see the relevance of this suite of problem-solving skills, and they are thinking about how to extend it now in AI learning contexts. And so, if anything, the importance of focusing on a way of problem solving rather than on programming languages and programming has been validated with, this shift to AI. But again, Matti and others have started to think about, CT 2.0, which is, whereas earlier programming was more, rule-driven, formalizing the algorithmic step-by-step executing. Machine learning, and this again was a conversation just this morning, it's a different paradigm. It really, when you're thinking about the problem, you have to think about the data, filtering, cleaning, labeling, training a model, evaluating. So it's slightly different. And they say that it's a conceptual change in computing education. I slightly disagree there. I think it's just a paradigm shift. Because let's face it, students are still going to learn to, machine learning models do still, their programs. And though the paradigm is different, and so there's still, but there are distinctions. And so at the K-12 level, students are not really going to code machine learning models, but they need to understand this distinction, this paradigm shift, that it's more inductive problem solving, it's less transparent. You can't just do debugging in a neural net, it's those kinds of things. And there's a lot of distinctions. They've presented this work in a few places, and that's why I wanted to share it here. It's much more black boxed than it used to be. The other thing that's emerging is the centrality of AI ethics, that it's a crucial piece of teaching AI with much more urgency than existed with computing education. Critical interrogation of the biases embedded in AI systems that creep in at various stages. People just talk about data being biased, but that's an odd way of putting it. It's just the way things are trained, how they're used, and yes, data. It's how you collect it as well, but that bias can creep in various stages, even in deployment. An AI model can work great for something, but if you just try and use the same model in some other societal context, it may have different outcomes and which may not be equitable. So that is at the center of all curricular experiences. Everybody is sort of making this a very key piece of AI learning. And for example, there's this whole group at MIT called Responsible AI for Social Empowerment and Education, raise.mit.edu. They have a whole middle school curriculum called AI and Ethics. They have one called Inclusive AI Literacy. Recently, somebody at Marcella Worsley, student at Northwestern, she is doing this project on Black life in the age of AI, and so that is looking. The whole course is sort of resources about the ethics and impacts of AI on blacks in particular. The other thing is plurality of pedagogies. Now, this existed even in computing education, but these are slightly different. When it comes to AI education, there's exploring of pre-designed models and tools that exist out there. There's digital and non-programming interactives that people are using just to show a visualization of, say, how a neural net is trained. Or there's still constructionist sense-making, unplugged activities, which became very popular in computer science, and that exists today. Using existing APIs for AI, for classification and prediction. Some people are actually trying to lift the hood through actual programming of ML models, and I'll show an example of that from our work. There's integrating movement and cultural practices and socially relevant AI apps. And finally, ethics focused. So lots and lots of different pedagogies. So I'm now going to drill deep, zoom in to two National Science Foundation funded R&D projects that I have led or co-led to design AI for high school students. The first is CS Frontiers. It was a 4-year effort to design a four-module curriculum on distributed computing, AI, machine learning, cybersecurity, Internet of Things, and software engineering, which was sort of the capstone of just teaching software engineering in order to do a big project on these other things that they have learned, AI and cybersecurity. The focus was on engaging high school girls, lots of interdisciplinary connections made, and a collaborative project between Vanderbilt, North Carolina State University, and my organization, Looking Glass Ventures. The other is AI and Cybersecurity for Teens, a 2-year exploratory effort that focused on integrating AI and cybersecurity. It was funded by the National Science Foundation Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace Program, which has an EDU component to it. So this was about teaching AI in the context of real-world cybersecurity issues, for example, bot detection, denial of service mitigation, etc. And we also extended this to sort of see if we could lift the hood on AI and machine learning and how it works. And this was a project, again, collaborative between Looking Glass, Vanderbilt, and University of Nebraska, Omaha. Both rely on this technology called NetsBlocks. It's a programming environment. It's an extension of Snap that many of you may know about, with amazing capabilities. So I'll just spend a couple minutes sharing a little bit about NetsBlocks. It's the brainchild of my colleagues Brian Brohl, who did this as part of his dissertation with his advisor Akos Leditsi at Vanderbilt. And it's designed to bring down the walls around Snap, and which is, like a more powerful brother of Scratch, like we were discussing the other day. So opening up Snap to the internet really unleashes a world of possibilities. I thought this would be a good metaphor for today. So it makes NetsBlocks it's a very low floor and accessible but very powerful protean tool that can be used for many advanced topics in computer science. So it does this with two simple abstractions. One is remote procedure calls. So it really has a call block, which works like any other custom block. But using that, you can sort of give it arguments and access data sets on the internet. And similar RPCs are sort of grouped into a service. For example, weather will be a service, but you can do an RPC on temperature or rainfall or, air quality and things like that. So simply, the way it works, from the program, it's sent to the NetsBlocks server. The NetsBlocks server, requests it to the API on the internet, gets the result, brings it back to the program. So this is like every day there's more and more things that we are adding to this. So this just shows like the drop down of the many things that that we can access on the internet, the RPCs and the services. There's maps and history, language, movie database, New York Times, Twitter, Pixabase and image database. Science alone has things like air quality, COVID-19 data, earthquakes. I mean, it's just endless. So many possibilities and authentic online data sets, and you can create your own as well. So you can bring in a CSV file and sort of make it into a service and use it online. So you can even nest calls. So for example, here the Mauna Loa database in Hawaii is getting the carbon dioxide trend data from 1960 to 2020. And then you give that data into the chart service, which is a GNU plot charting service. And within that block, that is the outcome. So imagine, just look at the low floor. You literally have to do these two things, and students can suddenly see so many great, I'm sure your mind is already maybe buzzing with all the integration possibilities. So here's an example of accessing data with Google Maps and overlaying it with weather. This is again an astronomical map, so you can navigate a sky map for kids who may be interested in astronomy. Here's a student project where students access the online movie database to create a trivia game. And think about it, the movie database becomes a source for actually interrogating social issues. Maybe you can do some analyses on gender representation in movies over the years or things like that. Instead of just showing the movie Hidden Figures, you can actually do some critical analyses around that. And, we did this project mostly during COVID-19. So charting the COVID-19 data from Johns Hopkins database was very popular. And it shows how students can engage also in data science, the processing of data, because the data that comes in from Johns Hopkins, I think, was accumulative data over the months. So to split it over days and things like that, students have to do pre-processing. And if anything is difficult, you can always abstract it and just give them the block to say process data, use the process data block. So it depends on the age of students and the experience. They can sort of design their own or actually, use pre-designed blocks that we can give them. So they do these visualizations and work with abstractions such as lists and multidimensional data structures. So a lot of computer science happening in the midst of all this data science and distributed computing. And because data is everywhere, NetsBlocks and CS Frontiers really does open up a lot of opportunities for integration. The second abstraction is message passing. So just like you have events in Scratch, like broadcast and when I receive, there's messages. So you can do send message and when I receive. And you can have a message editor and you can actually create it with different number of arguments or whatever. And so you can do a lot of chat-based applications, multi-user game applications, etc. And even collaborative projects because you just need to be sending messages. So this is our CS Frontiers team. These were the many teachers we worked with. April actually has now run the whole CS Frontiers in her classroom she's been piloting it for the entire year. And all four modules of CS Frontiers are grounded in project-based learning, collaborative activities, integration, data science, engagement, and the AI curriculum. So coming to the topic of discussion for today, it has activities in nets blocks. It also uses a lot of open source materials. Like I said, a lot of tools have already been designed, games and things like that, activities. So we use those, and we also mapped to the AI for K-12 Big Ideas progression chart. So this gives a sense for the 9 units and the kinds of activities students did. They are all project-based, multidisciplinary, making real-world connections. We balance instruction with scaffolding and exploration and also choice. We use Parsons puzzles in the activities. I'll just show. We use discussions on real-world issues. We bring in speakers because remember the broader goal was engagement for girls, and we promote data literacy skills and a lot of collaboration because all projects are done in pairs or groups. So giving one specific example, there's the sentimental writer, which basically classifies any given text as positive, negative, or neutral, and it uses this publicly available API called parallel dots. And so you can call parallel dots and you say get sentiment. You can also do you can also classify sarcasm, hate speech. It has a few different RPCs. And so we start with sort of an unplugged and pseudocode. We sort of think about how it might be done. And then we give students a Parsons puzzle, which is a mixed up blocks in Snap, and they sort of snap that together. And then students sort of move on to actually analyze text from New York Times or lyrics and things like that. And this again goes back to being able to access a lot of data sets. An example of how we integrate conversations of ethics in AI. So for example, students use the Quick Draw. Anybody use the Quick Draw application? Okay, lots of you. Okay, so it's very interesting, and it's a great example to show students how the machine learns from thousands and thousands of examples, hundreds of thousands of images. But then we go into GitHub pages and we see what data Google has collected. And then we ask students, did you know that Google was collecting this data? Is it good that they collected it without your permission? In this particular case, if it's anonymous, is it okay? In what context may it not be okay? So these kinds of conversations you can sort of very seamlessly integrate throughout the curriculum. There's a bunch of papers we've written, but I just want to point out a couple of them. One from last year's AAAI conference, which now has this AI education component, EAAI. There's a 6Z paper, and if you want to learn about nets blocks, this is a wonderful journal paper that came out recently that really describes all its fantastic features. The second project is cybersecurity education in the age of AI, and that's our team. Now, cybersecurity is less glamorous than AI, let's face it, but it's also emerging as a very critical piece of computing, and because it impacts security of individuals and organizations and even nations and infrastructure these days. So why should we integrate these two? Well, both are fast growing and increasingly important. It leads to better understanding. We keep looking for authentic ways of teaching things. So if you're in a cybersecurity classroom, teaching it without AI today is very inauthentic, because the truth is that AI is used out in the real world in the context of cybersecurity. Nobody is manually going through data and detecting anomalies and things like that. It's all done through pattern matching, pattern recognition, and machine learning models. And if you're looking at AI, teaching the various models, etc., but contextualizing it in the context of cybersecurity issues makes it, learning in context. But most important, I think, are the practicalities. We keep throwing more and more into the school now. In addition to CS, we have to teach AI. We want to teach cybersecurity. So the better way is, of course, to somehow find ways to integrate so that you can hit the learning goals of multiple disciplines rather than separate courses, because we can't make that much room. And the reality is that there's so many use cases for AI to be put to use in the field of cybersecurity. So clearly there's a case for leveraging and exploring the integration of the two. So normally, when you teach cybersecurity, these are the kinds of concepts. It's usually an elective course in high school. There's very little programming in it. And usually when you teach AI in high school, you're talking about these kind of machine learning techniques, etc., at the high school level. But what we did was sort of mush these two together and teach those AI ML ideas, but contextualized in the context of cybersecurity. So the pedagogical approach, as we said, is learning in context, making connections. So every project or unit sort of starts with a real world hook. We bring a story because there's just so much out there. You can really bring almost every day, there'll be some article or the other. You can just pull in as a hook to discuss, and then we have guided exploration and engagement to build intuitions of machine learning techniques. Not always can they actually code everything, though we do go a good bit of the way. But at least they have an intuition of how the machine learning is happening. We use a lot of online tools and existing interactives, but we also created our own pre-programmed games. We scaffold the complex techniques through this idea of glass boxing, so less of black boxing, more glass boxing in AI, and it's sort of levels of abstraction in reverse, where we're actually peeling away the onion and showing more and more about how it works as you go down. And sense making, with discussions and those topical issues, and then all activities are collaborative. And the big goals of AI that we cover there are lifting the hood, how the machine learns, how to examine data and features. This idea of optimization, that is, that's the way the machine is learning, generalization, overfitting, underfitting, how bias can impact. I feel that if you lift the hood on AI, that understanding of bias is also more, it's more authentic and deeper, rather than just sort of this superficial, there are biases in AI. And this very important idea of adversarial thinking, especially since we're talking cybersecurity. Anytime you train a model, think about how that model can be fooled. And I'll give an example of that. So these were the curricular activities. We had activities in NETS blocks, and also we had recurring topics which were, sort of in all of these, covered in all of them. And then we had a lot of unplugged and interactive activities before coding. So just as an example, that sentiment analysis application that I just showed project, we kind of use that in the context of a chat application, framing it as in the thing of cyberbullying and cyber safety, how, hate language is sort of censored, and how is it detected on Twitter, how do you automatically remove things, how is Google immediately putting, something if it detects hate language, so those kinds of issues we sort of brought in using the sentimental analysis thing. And for more complex machine learning techniques, such as coding of decision trees or neural nets, we followed this kind of scaffolded progression because it's complex, and this was in the context of Twitter bot classification. Students first sort of explore a data set, a manageable data set. They look at the features. They kind of see what could be a bot, what could be a human. Then they do a scaffolded activity and build a rule-based classifier within NETS blocks. Then we sort of think about how you might automate that process through a program, and we think about it in terms of pseudocode. And finally, they actually look at an actual classifier in NETS blocks. So think of the high ceiling now. We actually have these machine learning models coded in NETS blocks, but obviously students don't code all of them. We give them pieces of it to sort of explore and look at. So this is what it looks like. This is CodeApp. It's a dynamic data exploration tool, they classify, they do this kind of scaffolded programming, they evaluate how well it worked, the pseudocode, and finally looking at all of it sort of in Parsons puzzles, giving them blocks of code to see where they might go. Finally, students run the whole classifier in NETS blocks and then examine the resulting decision tree. And they see, how, only a machine can sort of decide that if number of tweets is greater than 8765, that's something a human can't. We can say, okay, if it had a profile picture or didn't, or if they tweeted too much or something like that. But then the next step is, how might you fool this model? So, starting from the top, let's tweet less than 31. Let's have a picture, so how might a bad actor actually fool this classifier so that they would be classified as a bot, as a human rather than a bot. I'm running a little short on time, but I'll make these slides available, but there is another example sequence that sort of looks at the gradient descent, how to teach this complex algorithm, and they actually play a game in the beginning to just build an intuition of how you sort of reach, optimize to a certain point. So there's this find the minimum game, and the rest of it sort of follows the same thing that I showed. And here are the papers that we have published recently. I urge you to read them and take a look at them. All the resources are available online on websites, etc. So this comes back to we are using free materials, but we're also creating and putting them back. So zooming back out, this is the plethora of free curricular resources. So AI4K12.org is maintaining this list of a lot of resources. So if you want to look at free activities and tools, etc., do go there. So, despite all this R&D work, there's a lot of challenges and tensions that need to be resolved, and we'll look at these shortly, but many issues can be resolved with a few commonsensical recommendations that I would make. One is build on lessons from K-12 CS education. We've done a lot on pedagogy, equity, teacher preparation. Use those same learnings. Dovetail CS and AI education, integrate it into core subjects, and focus on building an empirical base for age-appropriate progressions and pedagogies. So let's do a whistle-stop tour on the big lessons from K-12 CS education. Computer science for all. One big lesson was, a focus on affective skills and computational thinking, in addition to CS concepts and practices, integration with and into other subjects, attending to, non-cognitive, both cognitive but also socio-cultural and socio-political, plurality of pedagogies. We've sort of seen this already happening in AI as well, and teacher preparation, that no effort to introduce any of these things is going to succeed without preparing teachers. And so there's many ways. And so when I first was to do this talk, I was told to focus on the book. And so this is my way of sort of bringing, because a lot of these ideas are actually, featured in the book in some form or another. So looking at the first one, now, a key breakthrough in K-12 CS programming, CS and programming education was this recognition that in addition to concepts and practices, we need to attend to interpersonal and intrapersonal skills as well. Attitudes, beliefs, mindsets, these are central to our learning goals, and they connect to this idea of deeper learning. This is what is featured in, this very key chapter of the A to Z handbook. And then there was this idea that computational thinking skills, it's basically, you teach these skills so that you transcend programming languages and help learners engage and apply computing in various subjects, domains, situations, and we sort of saw that it's a composite set of skills. Not all of them all the time are at work, but for the most part it is around these skills. And even the conceptualization of CT has expanded to include more situated and critical framings from where it started, and CT-related research obviously has lessons for AI education. And a big aha for me was that framing it for computer science classrooms is different for CT framing in integration settings. And one is a disciplinary thinking skill like mathematical thinking or scientific thinking in a science or math classroom. You have computational thinking. But then in integration issues, it's a tool as a means to an end, as Lauren referred to yesterday. And there's a whole talk that I gave in Manila about 5 years ago. If you want to go there, that's the QR code, but it's an hour-long presentation on that. So integration with and into subjects. CT and CS integration in various stages of K-12 learning has been a huge part of my work. It's included projects from the high school to the pre-K level, but also included things like symposia and special issues that I have worked on, and also this chapter in the K-12 handbook. And there's many, many examples from both mathematics and science and non-STEM settings, from language arts to music to social studies, that are featured in this chapter. But the culmination for me from all these learnings was this framework that I published. It's based on the TPAC framework, which addresses these relationships amongst the key elements that comprise integration of computing with STEM and other subjects. And I think this will be very useful framing for AI integration, as well as we look to integrate AI into other subjects, including for curriculum and assessment design and teacher preparation. And one aspect of the framework that I want to emphasize because of its relevance to AI is the centrality of data in integration efforts, because data is at the heart of scientific and engineering inquiry, and it's a crucial linchpin for integration. So students can work with data from or relevant to a domain. They can answer questions from that domain. They engage in data practices, science, data science, and also integrate computational thinking. And all these emerging topics in AI can sort of be integrated through data. The third one now is non-cognitive skills, but combining cognitive with socio-cultural, etc. Now, for those of us from the learning sciences, we've always known and applied this all along. It's a very foundational philosophy of the learning sciences that cognition, context, and culture are very closely intertwined in every learning situation, regardless of subject. And although, you can sort of separate it out into 4 different things, and often research is sort of looking at one or the other, the truth is that they are all intertwined in this broad umbrella of socio-cultural learning. And when you think about equity today, they also talk about empowerment through socio-political aspects of learning as well. And so there's, culturally relevant pedagogy has become a very key thing in computer science education, at least in the US. There's a chapter on this in the K-12, A to Z K-12 handbook. They've also come out with a framework on this, the K-POR Center. So again, these will be learnings that will be relevant in AI as we think about them as well. So when we thought about CS, it was contextualizing programming activities, drawing from students' cultural assets and knowledge, making connections between learners' interests and identities and perspectives and everyday lives, and having these conversations, even if they're uncomfortable in these computing contexts, and engaging in computational discourse. So all these, again, will be relevant for AI. And so it's through attention to context, culture, and connections that we demonstrate what matters when you're teaching computing. And in AI, or whatever the next thing that comes along, that it's always the humans in the equation that matter above all else. Plurality of pedagogies. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, since we've kind of looked at what's happening in AI, but there are all these pedagogies that have come out over the years in CS education: constructionist learning, universal design to help students with disabilities, culturally relevant pedagogy, creative computing, guided exploration, unplugged, worked examples, scaffolding, integration, crossing boundaries with physical computing, pair programming, questions, feedback through formative. And so lots of choices, and I'm sure people will find their way. In programming classrooms alone, there's so many different pedagogies that have come out. Most of them have come out around the teaching of programming, actually. Lauren referenced use, modify, create. We also have a version of it called use, modify, choose. So that students don't have to start with a blank slate, but they're given some sort of, some starter projects or some ideas to start with. And lastly, teacher preparation. I don't have to repeat, it was a lot of it was the conversation of yesterday's keynote. Teachers are key stakeholders. Co-design helps, it benefits them. Benefits of co-design extend to teacher preparation. You want to build teachers' pedagogical content knowledge and start with their prior expertise, and teacher communities help, and resources do too. One mistake we made in CS education was we really, in teacher preparation, started mostly with teaching them about the curriculum. Then we started thinking about pedagogy after a few years. And assessment still remains a very, classroom assessment, formative assessment has not been attended to, when in reality these 3 things are very key intertwined functional components of any classroom practice. And that is something that we want to do correctly. It's something that I focused my work on these last few years, building on that chapter in the A to Z handbook. I came up, we had an NSF funded project on formative assessment. We came out with a framework for formative assessment. And now we have this whole module, 4-part module, freely available, that is focusing on formative assessment that can be plugged into any teacher preparation program. So lastly, finally, challenges, open issues, recommendations. Lots of challenges and tensions currently. Some that we can address, some that we can't. We can't change this part of it. It's very rapidly changing. There's no way, if we start teaching something today, we design a curriculum. I mean, everything that has been happening until, say, 6 months ago didn't talk about large language models. Now everybody wants to talk about large language models. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Misperceptions about AI. So there's a lot of this, AI is magical. Is it sentient? Is it infallible, human-like, blah, blah. So we have to work extra hard in AI classrooms when we are teaching to basically draw these distinctions of what humans can do better and what AI can or cannot do, that it cannot be sentient, for example. And things like that. So we have to tackle that. It's a crowded curriculum. We've already talked about this. What is AI's curricular relationship? Can we just embed it into the curriculum without really disrupting, the timetable, so to speak? Building teacher capacity. This is another key one. How deep can we go given that, it's technical? What does AI for all mean? Like, CS for all meant teaching this much of programming. How much of AI are we going to teach? How deep can we go? We need a very robust evidence base. And again, there's terminology issues. I hear the phrase AI literacy, AI for K-12, AI in K-12, AI education, AI about AI, teaching with AI. I mean, it's all these different things, and they do mean different things. There is this application of AI in the classroom, like bringing ChatGPT into the classroom to teach something, or it is teaching about AI. So the Teach AI folks have sort of tried to draw this distinction between AI literacy and AI plus computer science. Because in a summit that happened in August, clearly this was very confusing for people. So with AI literacy, you're basically talking about being intelligent enough to, or having the skills to sort of use AI, with understand applications, implications, ethical considerations. And with CS integration, you're actually doing a lot more of what we do in CS. The kind of examples we've shown is sort of using data, maybe going deep into, learning, machine learning models and things like that. But it's still unresolved. I mean, what is it that's going to be? So in my mind, I feel like AI literacy is like a foundational layer. Maybe this wasn't supposed to be arrows, but maybe more like a base layer of foundational literacy for everybody. Then there's an AI and CS that all students must have. And that's, using those pre-trained models, understanding various machine learning techniques, what they are, how they work, but not really doing the coding because it's too complex. And this sort of is at the same level with integration into other core subjects. And then there's maybe, going deeper like we have in high school, but that's probably not for everybody. It's more advanced, and that's an elective. But clearly, integration is the only answer. Multi and interdisciplinary projects that integrate CS and AI, CS, AI, and data science, situated in context drawn from various subjects, science, math, health, climate science, etc., examination of ethics and biases throughout. One example from the Gwinnett County Public Schools, they have a definition for AI-ready students, which sort of covers these competencies in a very holistic way. There's data science, mathematical reasoning, creative problem solving, ethics, applied experiences, and programming and computer science. So maybe we have to think of these kind of ways instead of adding one more thing. So thoughtful integration is really the only answer. Coming back to this image, it's all about dovetailing these two issues. I don't think we can really add it as a separate topic. And so we really do need to seriously relook and revamp our K-12 CS goals and standards to sort of bring more AI, shift the emphasis, as I said earlier. Thankfully for us, at least in the US, I don't know if anybody follows the K-12 CS standards in the US, but there's a big effort now to completely revamp them. It looks like a long time. I don't know where AI is going to be in 2027 if they start now, but that is the goal. And so, it's abundantly clear that we are headed into a fundamentally different future than we were in. Maybe we are in it already. Like they say, the future is here, and AI is only going to get more and more powerful. And the sooner we start adjusting our CS and AI education, the better off all of us will be. And with that, I end. Yes, that's too much information. I had that chip. But remember, I have not yet talked about how to bring AI into computing education to start teaching using ChatGPT, and maybe that's the topic for next time. So, thank you. By the way, those are our images from our Zoom sessions. All our research in these last few years has happened. And these are our project teams for the 2 projects that I described.
Many, many thanks, Shuchi, for the extremely rich and insightful presentation. We will be looking forward to the slides for sure.
Yes, that was a lot.
So thanks, Shuchi, for really impressive presentation. I would like to ask to get your thoughts on, you mentioned several times Matti Tedre, and he's bridging this between computer science and philosophy, philosophical issues, and the last papers is focused on computational thinking 3.0.
3.0, yeah.
And he wanted to bridge, the most important is, as you mentioned, data agency, one side, machine learning, but also social aspects.
Yeah.
And in social aspects, ethical, and he mentioned, not he, as authors, also about values, values, attitudes. How we can bring in school, because it became very important to teach education and to our kids. If you have some thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean, in some sense, whether we call it CT 3.0 or 2.5 or whatever, the idea is that a lot of what you've just mentioned is already sort of in the thinking and framing. A lot of people that they're doing, where they're doing these AI ethics-focused curricula, for example, or data science-focused, they are kind of asking those questions, like I said. There is critical examination of all of this is very central. Now, if we want to formalize it and give it a name and sort of bring, I think those are the things Matti has sort of been ahead on. They've got that big generation AI project in Finland. I don't know, I'm an advisor on it, but I haven't been able to attend any of the meetings because of the time difference. I think you may be on it too, I don't know. My thinking is that I think it will, I don't know whether what he has described is what we will land on, but I do feel that there is a shift in the way we want to say, what we want to say about what type of skills we want to build in students. Like I said, they talk about conceptual changes. I feel it's a paradigm shift, but those are just, I think all of us are sort of on the same page that things are shifting and our ways of thinking about what skills we want students to learn are shifting. Thanks.
I have another question. Thank you for your great efforts. That's very impressive work. I was wondering in the curriculum, one of the key pillars that you had were reasoning. So I first wanted to ask what kind of reasoning are you talking about? Are you talking about model reasoning, like internal model reasoning?
Yes. So oddly enough, that particular pillar of the big 5, when you look at examples that are out there, that is the least explored.
Exactly.
And yes. And I feel like it is about thinking about, what sort of data structures are going to lead into what kind of, answers, and what kind of data has to be gathered, what features, how you organize that data in order to make sense of it. And I think it is supposed to be model reasoning, but not much has been done on it. I feel in CS Frontiers, we kind of explored that a little bit because we kind of dig deep into the data and think about what sort of organization. For example, in CodeApp, when we play around with that dynamic data exploration, we see what are the ways in which we sort of are able to separate the features out most cleanly. So those are the kinds of things we want students to be thinking about. It's about the representations of the information that are then going to lead to your predictions and conclusions later on.
But maybe a follow-up. Is this discrepancy, because even like cutting-edge AI researchers are very clear about the fact that we don't understand how these models work internally.
Yeah.
And that they're pretty sure that no actual reasoning is going on, although we cannot really prove it mathematically. So my question is, are you specifically addressing this gap between what we perceive as reasoning?
I don't believe that is happening. I don't think that those conversations are happening. I do think that there is an understanding that so when we talk about, so a lot of people have tried to teach how the neural networks, teaching, how through unplugged activities, even that Ray's group at MIT has also got some activities, and they teach about backpropagation. We do it through showing the gradient descent, the weights, how the weights can be tweaked, how you slowly, like that project that I talked about, the registration bot, where we start with the find the minimum game. We sort of arrive at this understanding that things are getting tweaked. But in the real world, yes, I mean, with a billion parameters and hyperparameters, you have no idea. And yes, I think there has to be, I don't know whether at K-12 it makes sense to tell students, like, at the end of the day, we have no idea how this is working. But I think that the truth is that we can give them an intuition of what may be happening, and that's what we do. We start at those basic levels of showing how you give weights to each of the labels and features, and then you tweak those to get to a better and better model for prediction. But then when those 5 features become 5 billion, what happens, so yeah, it's about building intuitions maybe, but I do know that not many are sort of digging very deep into this particular topic. But it's good that you asked that, because that is one of the understudied portions. So if you're looking to do something in AI education research, there's your literature gap.
Thank you very much for this extraordinary talk. I'm so happy that it is streamed, because so a semester of lectures in 1 hour. So I just want to ask if there are net blogs that can integrate these large language models, that can maybe contact to ChatGPT or something like that, and to deal with it.
Yes, so I think there is now, like I said, everybody sort of jumped on that bandwagon sort of in this year. One thing that we've already done, and I didn't show here, is that we in the ACT project, the cybersecurity project, and for the CS Frontiers, we actually do have one simple ChatGPT-like app that students develop. It's an n-gram solver basically. So starting with the fact that you're sort of predicting the next letter or next word and things like that. But there is efforts afoot. They are integrating LLMs. Yes. Simple answer is yes.
Okay. Thank you, and also thank you for this great presentation and for the suggestion you proposed to us. A lot of things I'm gonna go through, but I have 2 questions for you. The one is about the language you mentioned at the end of the challenges. You use somehow machine learning and AI as synonym.
Yeah.
And it is something that, of course, we discussed it in the doctoral consortium on Sunday. Is that okay to mix them up, to use them as synonym, or maybe we should be more careful to present it as a more diverse, I don't know, kind of techniques and system? This is the first question. And the second one is about maybe it is follow-up, connected to the reasoning question before. In those diagrams that you show about the basic idea, the big ideas,
Big five.
I think it captures a lot of things, but I don't see much computing ideas in that. It's more about how to apply artificial intelligence system for things, and also the programming. You do some code using these AI services or something like that. What we were wondering on Sunday is what are the basic CS principles in AI that should be taught? As computer scientists, I mean, we have this focus, so maybe there is something that can be shown and that it's hidden in that kind of summary.
So to the first question, I think yes and yes is my answer. When you talked about, the question was AI literacy, AI and machine learning. So yes, so I think the idea is that today when we talk about AI in classrooms, because machine learning has become the biggest kind of AI that's being used, and because it is what's driving many of the applications today, it seems to have become synonymous for that reason. But I do know that almost every AI curriculum kind of makes this distinction initially when they're introducing AI to say AI is a lot of different things. Machine learning is one of the most popular, avatars of AI right now, and then it's all about machine learning after that. So in some sense, it's kind of become synonymous until something, there is a reason to draw the distinctions. It depends again on the grade levels. At the younger grades, maybe it's not necessary. When we talk about examples of AI, how recommendations are happening, say on Netflix or when they go shopping or whatever, those are all sort of, a lot of them are the learning from data piece of it. So that's, but I think it's important to draw the distinctions. Your second question is a lot more interesting and something we have also debated. When this framework first came out, it kind of came out of the stables. There was a workshop in just before COVID, 2018, I think, in December, and or 2019, and they released this, and we were like, where's the CS in it? What's happening? Is this a new thing? Is it separate from CS K-12? What happened to the big ideas of computing education for high school? Why is this separate? So now there's an agreement, or sort of a coming to a consensus, that we do need to integrate. And so the computing piece needs to exist with the AI. That's what I've been trying to say. We need to reframe these big ideas and our standards to sort of make sure that the two are together and not completely separate like this. That's my view of the K-12. But when you're thinking about an AI curriculum, what examples to take, those big 5 ideas are definitely useful, for thinking of activities. In terms of what CS topics, etc., I know that there are efforts that are bringing in, integrating AI into CS. There is work by, these are all citations in my paper, by the way. So there was one good example where I saw them teaching CS in high school, but all through CS AI lens. So for example, they're talking machine learning models, etc., but they teach topics like breadth first search and, things like coming back to the topic of representations and things like that. So these are very CS topics, but they're all contextualized in AI. And a little bit, to some extent, it's happened in our CS Frontiers work too, even though it's the AI ML module, they're working with multidimensional lists, they're doing list processing and things like that. They're learning those kinds of things, which normally, organically, they don't learn in high school. But this, because the data is coming from nets blocks in a table, they have to go from that one-dimensional list that they've been working in to start looking at how to, even the sentiment analysis, it's a two-dimensional table. So those are ways in which you can very sort of integrate CS and AI. It needs some thinking and some work, but there are. And I think there should be more effort to do that. I think that's where we need to push, is to somehow find ways to authentically integrate these two disciplines rather than keeping it very separate.
So let's take one last question for Shuchi.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
Most of the things we are teaching in school are like centuries established fact. In computer science we don't have centuries, but most of the science has been based like 50 years ago. And I feel like AI is not using any new science, it's just an industrialization process. So is teaching AI now really a paradigm shift? Should we completely rethink what we are doing? Or should we just like build on what we are already teaching about data and algorithms when experiment as just the consequence of it? And about all the socio-ethical aspects and in the context of school teaching, where usually we have different fields, is computer science even the right field for that, since there are like history lectures or sociology lectures that have been addressing like trustability of source or effects, side effects for like many years?
That's a very, very interesting question. It probably goes more to maybe what Mate and others are thinking of, or in the way they're thinking about things. So the thing, yes, I think the simple answer is that I think a lot more can be done to integrate AI into other disciplines, into other core subjects, which is why I said those two arrows in that last progression should actually be sort of alongside. It's integrated into CS, but also into other subjects in the same way. The reason CS is a very natural extension is because AI used to sort of be a subtopic that was touched upon in computing, and now it's become bigger, so people just want to do more AI kind of coding and applications, so CS felt more natural, and because obviously CS and AI people are sort of the same departments in universities, etc. But I think a lot of thought needs to go into what you are describing, but I think that will be very worthwhile. And that's why I kept writing core subjects, because the core subjects, language arts, history, we had difficulty integrating computing. And I feel like AI, because of the excitement that people have around AI, so that it can be like the Trojan horse in some sense to take CS also into the classroom, because people want AI in the classroom. Everybody wants AI, and teachers have started to use ChatGPT. Etc. So basically, because there is so much more awareness, the selling, it's a smaller lift to sort of do the selling job of taking it in the classrooms. But then doing that thoughtful integration and actually designing the curricula, those are the things that need to be done. And I think those will be the exciting spaces for AI in K-12 research, I feel.
So we have obviously huge interest from the audience about AI. Don't miss the panel discussion at the end of the day, moderated by Tim and Michaeli. Shuchi will be back. Shuchi will be back here as well. So thank you.
I've spoken enough. Let the other panelists talk. Thank you.